out for a while and thought I'd like to try to present how these ideas come together for me and like start a conversation around it. It's kind of vague, you know, exploring the behavioral science of interconnectedness. It could have easily been, just as easily been, you know, the psychology of oneness. There's a lot of different terms floating around here. But the basic idea, as I kind of explained earlier, is what, as human beings, what are the things that connect us? What are the psychological forces and the evolutionary forces that connect us? And what is the value of that connectedness? Why is it good for us, and how do we get more of it? That's kind of the gist of it. I want to start with a little exercise, and I've got Post-its and pens for y'all, and I want you to answer the question, are you a self? Are you a separate self? 1 to 10. 10 would be, I am a completely separate self. I am independent of all other people and things. 1 would be, I am completely interdependent. I am not a self. I am a pattern in the universe. Okay, so just think about it for a second and write down your number 1 to 10. Okay, you walked in right in the middle of our assignment. So did you hear the prompt? I'll repeat it. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. No. It's okay. The whole topic is interconnectedness, right? So are you interconnected, or are you a separate self? So 10 is I'm completely separate. I'm an individual, and I'm not dependent on anybody else or anything else. 1 is I'm completely independent. I mean completely interdependent on all other things, and I'm a pattern in the universe. Okay? That's our scale, 1 to 10. Okay?
Is there a wrong answer?
Yes.
No pressure.
But it's not one of the ends, it's like 4 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Apple would be a wrong
That's
answer.
wrong.
Yes. Okay, I see you guys are putting some thought into this. That's great. Okay. You can keep writing, you can keep thinking if you want to, but I'm going to jump to another little assignment. I want you to complete this sentence. You don't have to write it down. You can just think of it in your head. I am blank. But you do have to come up with an answer, because I'm going to go around to each individual person. So, I'll give you a minute. Okay, Sarah, I'm going to start with you.
You want the number too?
No, just this.
Okay, I am here.
I am here. Okay, very good.
I am me.
I am me. Okay.
I am human.
I am human.
I'm alive.
I am alive.
I am you and you are me.
Ooh, okay.
I am self-taught.
Self-taught.
I am a living human.
Okay.
I am skeptical.
Okay.
I am thinking.
Okay.
I always forget, I am human.
Okay.
I am cold.
I am animal.
I'm an animal.
I am curious where this is going.
Okay.
I am here.
Okay.
I am dependent.
Okay.
I am watching.
Okay.
I am connected.
Okay.
I'm learning.
Okay. All right. So that was interesting. Got a good range of answers. And what I'm looking for is there's some answers that are sort of talk about a relationship. I am connected to this, I'm connected to humanity. There's other answers that are more about me as a particular person. It's a little bit of a trick question, because I'm trying to sort of get you to think self-referentially, right? When I ask the question, everyone, and especially when I say I'm going to ask you to tell everybody what you said, you start thinking like, ooh, what am I going to say? And what can I say that's interesting? What can I say that not a bunch of other people are going to say? So it forces you to sort of think a little bit about yourself in relationship to other people. And in doing so, we're activating what's called the default mode network. So it is a series of structures in our brains that work together to create our sense of self. So when the default mode network is very active, we're very, very self-aware and thinking about ourselves. When it's very quiet, we're less aware of sort of the boundaries of ourselves, and we can feel more connected with other people and connected with the rest of the world. So you can get that feeling of interconnectedness, of depressing the default mode network through meditation, through prayer, through psychedelics, through deep focus, sort of flow. Those things actually quiet the default mode network, and that's how we can have experiences where we feel more connected with other people, with nature, with the world, with the universe. And the reason I bring this up, I'm not going to talk a lot about neuroscience, A, because I don't know a ton about neuroscience, and B, because it's very difficult trying to pinpoint parts of the brain and say, this feature does this, because everything works together so much. So why I bring that up is because to me, when I learned about this, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because it tells me that being a self is not inevitable. Being self-focused, the way that most of us feel most of the time, it is not inevitable, and I can do things that increase it or decrease it. So that feeling isn't necessarily the truth of our experience as a human being. It's a state that happens to be the state we're in a lot of the time. It's called the default mode because it's active when we are at rest, when we are engaged in introspection. And it's also called the default mode because, as most of us can relate to, it's sort of the pattern that our mind just slips into when we're not doing anything else. But for being the default mode, it isn't actually a lot of fun. So most of us walk around during the day, pretty much every hour of every day, if not every minute, and we're thinking these thoughts about ourselves in relationship to other people. Things like, I am cold. I am hungry. I am sad. I need a new car. They have a nicer car than me. They seem more successful than me. Why aren't I happier and more successful? Anybody maybe relate to having that similar pattern of thoughts? So, and it sucks. It's not usually a pleasant feeling. And just, for us to explore this a little bit for ourselves, if you think about the times in your life when you've been unhappy and unfulfilled, probably you felt disconnected. You may felt alone. You may have been with other people but not felt connected to them. But if you think about times in your life that you felt most fulfilled, probably, I'm not saying this is true of all people all the time, but probably you did feel connected. You felt connected to other people. You felt connected to nature. You felt connected to a purpose. So being a solitary self kind of sucks, right? But is it true? Is it true that you are a self, that you are a solitary individual self? So I want to explore this concept a little bit together using science. I'm going to avoid the woo-woo as much as possible in this presentation. And feel free to call me out if you disagree. So, is this your body that you're sitting in here, right? Most of the time we're thinking, yes, this is my body, this is me, this is where I begin and end. But 90% of the cells in your body are not human, right? So if 90% of the cells in your body aren't human, are they you? And those cells, all cells in our body, completely exchange every 7 to 10 years. So no cell in your body, it was part of you when you were born, right? So was that person you? Are you a different you now than you were then? And then at a physics atomic level, 99.999% of atoms are empty space. So 99.999% of you is empty space. And so, fun fact, 65 billion neutrinos from the sun pass through every square centimeter of your body every second. So it kind of like, I don't know, for me at least, it makes me think differently about like, this is my body and this is me and this is not me. Is this your breath that you're breathing? You know, we think our breath is like what keeps us alive. It's pretty darn important to us. When we meditate, you know, or pray, you know, we might be very mindful of that breath. But, you know, our breath is just gas, and we're constantly exchanging it. And then that, you know, gas is exchanging and mixing with the rest of the environment, the rest of the world, so much so that all of humanity is basically like breathing the same particles. So every breath you take has some molecule, statistically speaking, that was breathed by Abraham Lincoln. And every breath has a molecule that was breathed by Cleopatra. So is it your breath? Now, okay, fine, the rest of that we can easily dismiss, but my brain and my thoughts and my mind, that surely is me. That's me. But do we know where our thoughts come from? Do you know what your next thought is going to be? Can you predict it? If not, you know, did it originate from you? Did you control it? Are your thoughts right now the same as your thoughts if you went and got drunk later? Are your thoughts the same as if you were sick right now? Right? Our thoughts really, and our personality, frankly, ebbs and flows over time. We also know that our thoughts and our emotions are contagious. So when my friend is sad, I feel sad. When my friend is happy, I feel happy. Our behaviors are contagious. If my friend quits smoking, I'm much more likely to quit smoking. If my friend starts eating unhealthy, I'm more likely to start eating unhealthy. Welcome, guys.
Thanks,
Sit anywhere.
Cool.
Okay. So, are these your thoughts? One last piece is that when I'm up here gesticulating, part of your brain, the mirror neurons, are following that action and repeating it in your own head. The same motor cortex that would be doing this action for yourself is activated. Obviously, you're not compelled to do this like a puppet on strings, but in a sense, like, we are controlling each other's thoughts, right? If I stub my toe right now, some part of you, even if it's non-conscious, is gonna wince a little bit and feel a little bit of that pain, right? So our thoughts right now are influencing each other. So, are they your thoughts? Okay, what is the point of all of this? Again, this is my personal perspective and what I've taken from studying psychology and behavioral science and a tiny bit of neuroscience. But my hypothesis is that, you know, all of these distinctions that we make between ourselves are quite, you know, they're subject to question. And they don't always help us. You know, they keep us from connecting with other people, you know, close people and further away people, and influence our behavior such that we do things that aren't best for ourselves or our communities or the environment. And so oneness is about questioning those connections. It doesn't mean that, like, you achieve nirvana and you suddenly walk around just feeling connected with all the world. Like, that's impossible as humans to do. But if you do things that sort of remind you of those connections and cause you to question what your mind is going to tell you are the barriers between you and other people and things, it's good for you. It's good for empathy, it's good for compassion, it's good for reducing loneliness, it's good for reducing anxiety and depression and increasing happiness. It gives one a sense of purpose. So there's a lot of good stuff that happens with this, but it does take effort. So if that's so good, why don't we feel like this already, right? Like nobody probably walked into this room feeling like Zen, I am connected to everything, right? We walked in with that default mode activated, thinking me and them, and how are they friend or foe, or do I need to be on guard, or how do I compare with them? All of those, uncomfortable thoughts. So why don't we feel like this already? Well, evolution is a big part of it. We're talking about billions of years, and I'll try to sum it up in like 5 minutes. So, evolution doesn't care if we are happy, right? Evolution doesn't actually want us to be happy, because if we're happy and contented all the time, then why should I go take effort to get food? Why should I go reproduce? Evolution wants us to survive. And in order to survive, we have to be kind of aware of myself. This is me, and that's food, and that's a predator, right? And I want to go towards the food, and I want to run away from the predator. And so the earliest organisms that don't have any brain cells still have that pattern built into them where they know, very loosely speaking, to move away from the things that might hurt me or destroy me or eat me, and move towards the sources of food or light or other things that I need. And as creatures became more complex, we developed that into the fight or flight system. So that's the beginning of evolution, but then as we get more complex, evolution rewards survival, but also cooperation. And so, mammals and other complex organisms learned to work in groups, and that we could survive even better if we cooperate and work together. And so, from firstly, we want to cooperate with our other people that share our genes, right? Because if they survive, then my genes survive. But then as human beings, we learn to go beyond that to reciprocal altruism. So not just people that share my genes, but other unrelated community members that if I help them, they will help me. And so we get even more effective in surviving. And all those things, evolution has wired us to want to bond closely with people near us and to cooperate. And so we have neurochemicals like oxytocin and vasopressin that, when they're expressed, cause us to feel bonded and feel connected to people that are around us. So that's biological evolution, but then humans come up with this cool innovation called cultural evolution, where we can move faster than DNA can change. And so we develop technologies and tools and ideas that help us even further. And one of the innovations of humankind is systems of belief. And every system of belief that you can think of has enshrined some kind of sense of connectedness, some kind of sense of oneness. And so if you think about it really in evolutionary terms, and thousands and thousands of years of basically trial and error, right? There's all sorts of religions that died off, right? The ones that we still know about today are the ones that were adaptive in some way, right? They had some benefit to their members that helped them. And so one of those things, seemingly, was this idea of connectedness. We wouldn't see it in, all happening independently in different belief systems all over the world if it wasn't of value. So a lot of them start to sound very similar. As a mother would risk her life to protect her child, her only child, even so should one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings. All things carry yin and embrace yang. They reach harmony by blending with the vital force. The sage embraces oneness as his reality. Whoever saves a life, it's as if they saved all of humanity. Whoever takes a life, it's as if they have taken all of humanity. We are part of the earth and it's part of us. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are connected. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So all very diverse belief systems originating from different parts of the world and you know, different groups of people all value this sense of oneness. And so for a long time, living under these belief systems, that encouraged that behavior. But as human, you know, cultural evolution continued to innovate, and we found new ways to be even more successful, right? So over the course of modern history, we moved past some of those things. You know, we shift from clan-based societies to nuclear families. We developed things like in the West, the Enlightenment, where there's a focus on reason, on individual rights. In the Industrial Revolution, you know, we moved to anonymous city life, and in capitalism, you know, we focus on private ownership and profit. So these things have kind of chipped away, in a sense, at that sense of communalism and moved us in the direction of individualism. And psychology kind of followed suit. Psychology is relatively modern in general, but Freud said this, you know, wrote this very clearly. And he was writing to a friend who was talking about, why do we have religion? What is the benefit of it? And should we look at some of the benefits of it? And Freud was dismissive. He said, religious feelings, which include the so-called oceanic feeling, seem to be residues of infantile emotions. Such feelings are associated with a childish wish to return to an all-embracing unity and protection we experienced early in life, but which adults should no longer need. So basically you're saying, like, this seeking for oneness is something that we feel as a child, but we need to grow out of it. And that being an individual is sort of the mature way that all humans should work towards. So we continue, and now, you know, we're in the US in one of the most, you know, individualistic countries in the world. And our sense of connectedness is probably weaker than it's ever been. So since the 1980s, the average number of close friends that people report having has dropped by nearly a third, and the proportion of people saying they have no close friends has quadrupled. And depression has doubled in the last 50 years. And in the last 25 years, anxiety and depression among teenagers have increased by 70%. So there's a lot of factors involved in that, right? And I'm not going to say that there's any one factor that we can point to it, but there's certainly a correlation that as individualism has gone up and community has gone down, that our mental health has suffered. So what can we do about it? How can we take some of these ideas and apply them to ourselves to have more happiness and more connection? So I'm going to kind of repeat that little chart of rings from the inside out. So starting with the self. So it's kind of weird because I'm saying, like, don't be a self. Self-focus is not healthy. But do you feel connected to yourself, right? Like, we don't always feel connected to ourselves. And if we don't feel connected to ourselves, it's hard to then take the next step and extend that connection to someone else. So what do I mean by that? So firstly, we don't think about ourselves as one thing often. We categorize and we break it up. So we think mind and body, those, you know, are separate things. One, they're pulling against each other. You know, even within behavioral science, we think about, you know, system 1 and system 2, the rational versus the emotional. But the science is clearer than ever that our minds and our bodies are inextricably linked. One can't be healthy without the other. And our mind isn't even just up here, right? We have neurons in our gut, the same cells that are in our brain in much fewer quantities. We have neurons there that themselves can impact our emotions and our well-being. So, like, we have this, in science fiction, we have this, we imagine that, like, 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, we'll be able to, like, capture someone's brain or capture their thoughts and, like, put it into a computer, put it into another body and keep it alive. But, if you had a brain outside of a human body, would that be you, right? Like, that might actually be a horrifying experience. They're very closely connected. Another thing is that we sort of segment or prioritize different parts of our personality, right? So think about, like, the classic, like, angel and devil on the shoulder, like warring forces of doing good or doing bad. And that is also kind of an illusion. And there are therapies like internal family systems that have developed to actually help us integrate those parts of ourself, so to speak. And another even much simpler thing that we can do is simply journaling, right? So if you take some time to write out your thoughts, you're able to kind of get those different points of view out onto the page to reconcile them. And it helps you to kind of feel more like an integrated whole. And there's tons and tons and tons of evidence about the benefits of journaling, from physical health to mental health. But for purposes of our conversation, its benefit is to help you sort of bring those parts of yourself together. Now, close friends and family. So think about, and family being defined as whatever you define it as, with no reference to biology. So think about the people that are most important to you, the people that are closest to you. You don't need this presentation to tell you that those relationships are important to you, right? And that, like, they're the relationships that have the most power to heal and to hurt, right? And so we know they're important, but a lot of times we don't, when we're interacting with other people, we're kind of interacting with our mental picture of what they are, right? Like the role that they take in our head, that sort of, with all of our biases, with remembering the past things that they did that we didn't like. And so when we're with that person, are we really with that person? And so one thing we can do to help with that is simply active listening. So being mindful with that person, sitting down and really being present. A lot of times we have conversations, we're just thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say instead of listening to what this person's saying. So active listening just helps us to be fully present, to kind of discard notions of like what I'm going to say. And then by giving signs of acknowledgement that you're listening to them, and then by asking questions, and mostly coming with curiosity, right? Instead of coming with this idea of, I'm going to say this, and they're going to be bad about this, a lot of times those things play out the way that we, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you have curiosity about the other person, then you can truly know what's, who they are at that moment, and foster connection with them. Okay, so the next one is connections to all people, including people that aren't close to you, that aren't loved ones. So I want you to think about people that you don't know. Think about the checkout person at the grocery store. Think about the unhoused person that you might have passed on the way here. And, think about the other people in this room, right? That's when it gets a little harder to make those connections. And the funny thing about human connection, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? So that oxytocin and vasopressin, those bonding chemicals that make us feel closer to the people that are important to us, at the same time, they also make us more aggressive towards people that are outside of that circle. And make us less able to have empathy for people that are outside of our group, more likely to punish them if they do something wrong. So, this human empathy, we have to figure out how to expand it. And it's not easy to do. But one way to do that is through perspective taking. And it's simply just putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So, just a little thought experiment on the eve of a very divisive election, right? I want you to imagine someone who has the complete opposite political views that you do, right? Someone whose beliefs may seem to stand in complete opposition to everything that's important to you. Okay? So immediately we're feeling anxiety, we're feeling fear, we're feeling anger perhaps, and that's all natural. But if you put yourself in their shoes, imagine that person as a little child. Imagine them, growing up and experiencing their own moments of fear and joy and challenges, learning from their family, learning from their community, growing up as a teenager trying to find their place in the world. And today, surrounded by a community of people who may have the same belief systems and expect them to conform and, punish them, frankly, if they fall out of line. There's I don't know if you know Pete Holmes, comedian, podcaster, has a saying that I've heard in a couple of his podcasts, and it's, if I were you, I'd be you. So, a lot of times we think, if I were you, and then we follow it with the thing that we think that they should do, that we would tell them it's a better answer than the one they have, right? But if you can actually empathize with, if I were really you, right? If I was born with the same DNA as you, and the same family as you, and the same community as you, and had all of the exact same life experiences, can I really say that I would have different beliefs than you, or different behaviors than you, right? And so I say that all not to, obviously there are people in the world that do terrible things, and we don't have to say that that's okay, and we don't have to say that they're okay, right? But looking at the many, many people that are very different from us, that sometimes feel in opposition to us, and coming from a place of empathy and coming from a place of respect, right, I think enhances that sense of connection. Okay, so the last frontier is not just people, but all life. Think about plants and animals and the entire ecosystem, without which, there's no way you could exist, basically. And this is not something that we think about a lot, and that is not our fault, right? As human beings, we are wired to think about, what is right in front of us. And in our built environment, nature is typically not right in front of us. We kind of have built an environment that walls us off from it. And we also think about the here and now. We think about what's happening right this second. And unfortunately, things like environmental degradation and climate change happen very, very slowly. And our brains have a really hard time wrapping our head around those things that we just can't see from one day to the next. So it's not surprising that we don't feel connected to it, but oneness or interconnectedness can act as sort of an antidote to it. So there's research that shows that people that have oneness or interconnectedness beliefs completely independent of religion, that they are much more likely to act and vote and believe things that are pro-environment, pro-sustainability, that support all life, right? So having these beliefs helps us to act in big and small ways that supports the planet that we depend on. And one way we can do that is simply by spending time in nature. Going, you know, in small ways or large ways, just by, you know, going out on a short walk can remind you of that connection, can make it more salient. It also has the benefit of making you feel small. You know, the best experiences in nature remind you that you're a tiny, tiny piece of a much bigger system. So that's one way that we can kind of expand to that biggest connection to all living things. Okay, so I just covered a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of facts, a lot of ideas, a lot of suggestions, none of which I expect you to go out and do, right? So as a behavioral designer, I know that that is not how you get people to change your behavior, right? By giving them a big lecture and a long laundry list. So what are the things that we can actually do? And what are things that we are likely to do? So there's two hacks, so to speak, two ways to approach this that do work. One is to pre-commit, to while you're thinking about it, while you have the energy, while you have the emotional capacity to feel like you can take this on, make a commitment that later on is going to drag you along to doing the right thing when you no longer have that motivation or energy. So things like joining a club, things like, you know, joining this club, for example, joining this meetup. Yeah, you're here. Good job. You know, joining an environmental club, making plans with a friend. Better yet, making recurring plans with a friend. So that's one way, is make a decision when you have the energy so that you're committed later on when you don't have the energy. The other thing is make it a habit. Make a tiny choice every day that starts to compound and get easier and get more rewarding over time. So things like a daily meditation, a nature walk, talking to a stranger. And I say tiny very deliberately because our gut instinct usually is like, oh, I'm so in, I'm going to meditate 30 minutes a day, and I'm going to take an hour nature walk, and I'm going to talk to everybody I meet every day, right? And then 2 days later, you're like, no, done. But if you try to meditate 1 minute a day, right? If you say, take a deep breath, you know, every morning when you wake up and get out of bed. You know, if you walk down the block and back. You know, if you say, every time I go to the grocery store, I'm not going to do self-checkout, and I'm going to talk to the checkout person, right? So these are things we can actually do. All right, almost to the end/discussion part, but I want to do one thing, and I said I wasn't going to do like woo-woo stuff. This is probably the most woo-woo thing. But it doesn't require you to believe in any supernatural, non-scientific thing. But it's something that I got from a meditation app I like called Waking Up. And it is a breathing technique that helps, and it helps me to reconnect with that sense of connection in a very, very fast, easy way. So what it is it's just breathing in and out. But when you're breathing in, you take in kind of your visual field around you. You take in the people and the things and the environment and the air, and you just imagine sort of the connection to that coming towards you. And you breathe out, and you imagine yourself kind of expanding outward towards those things. Okay? So let's do 3 breaths. So, all right. Breathe in, and everything around you, just imagine coming in. So, in, out, breathing out and expanding. Breathing in, breathing out, and one more time. Breathing in, everything coming towards you, and breathing out, breathing yourself outward. All right. Last, very, very last thing. I want you to revisit your number and see if anything changed. You can, if it's the same, you can just circle it. But At this moment, do you feel like a 10, like you are a completely separate self, completely independent? Do you feel like completely interdependent, completely connected? Interconnected is 1, independent is 10.
One question. When you say 1 to 10,
Yes.
are you saying we are interconnected to what?
Interconnected to all of the universe.
Okay,
At
because
the greatest
this is
scale.
the universe and other people. Because I'm just thinking like, because if everybody is being a sheep and going to fall off the cliff,
Yes.
that's one question.
Right.
And also, like, my question is like nature, right? Because when it's like
So a 1 would be all that is, everything that we know that is, including the people and the sheep and the cliff and the air and the galaxy and the
that makes it
everything.
much more complex.
Well, it does, and that's why it's that far into the
Yeah.
scale, right? I mean, if anybody's a 1, like, raise your hand, like, tell me your secret. Yeah.
The difference between what you believe and what you experience most of the time.
Yeah,
Right? So,
yeah.
like,
I just, in this moment, right? Like,
Exactly.
of course you will have, I would expect everybody to have a different answer, you know, tomorrow or
Mhm.
10 minutes from now.
But I feel like I have to be higher in the scale because
Okay.
because in order for me to achieve oneness, I have to go against the grain. I have to be contrarian. I have to ask questions because people are sometimes like they're just asleep or they're not like.
I'm
or
not
they're
saying
not-
that the goal is to be
Yeah.
1.
No,
right?
but I'm just saying like for me personally, in order
Yeah.
to be really connected,
Yes.
I need to be separate myself and just like be loud or be engaging. So
Yeah.
not with others. For example, we talked earlier how we mimic a lot other people's behaviors.
Yeah.
I actually try to be the opposite. So if I
Yeah.
see somebody who's sad, I try to make them happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, if
Yeah.
somebody's too happy, I'm like, calm down.
Yeah.
So, a balancing act, but
Yeah.
also to be curious. Like there's also references earlier, and I'm going to be quiet, just like anyone.
Yeah.
The references, and this is something that comes in the culture a lot, and it's kind of a bit like, a little misguided. And people talk about, oh, don't be a child. One thing is to be childish, like behave like a child.
Right.
But one thing is to like nurture that child. That
Childlike
behave-
wonder.
Correct.
Um,
Inner child, nurturing
right.
that, and I think that's amazing. Like that's the
Yeah, yeah,
curiosity.
yeah.
That's how you can learn.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
of course.
So in order to achieve that, it's almost like to me it's like almost catch-22. I need to go against the grain and separate myself, not to be absorbed in the world of AI and technology and just
Right.
staring at computers and like.
Well, I mean, I guess you could, I mean, there's a lot of, gets very philosophical, which is perfectly fine. But if you're sucked into the world of AI, that's connected locally, right? That's
Correct.
following
I'm-
locally.
Correct, I'm saying like I have to
Yeah.
go against the grain because
Yeah.
everybody's following, so it's almost like it's tricky. To
Oh,
go
yeah.
1 to 10.
You're-
So I
yeah.
have to separate myself in order to.
Yeah, I mean,
Be more
you'll
connected.
here's what I'm taking away from this, right? If I feel so connected to all the people around me that I do what they do and I feel what they feel, that is going to pull me away from interconnectedness because the vast majority, pretty much all humans, most of the time, are not behaving in that way because that's not the way that we're wired. So there is getting anywhere past a 9 is hard. It takes work to do because you're going against the way that your brain is wired, right? And the way that our entire environment is designed, right?
So it's more like a journey, a process,
Yeah.
rather than just like one point at a time. It's like maybe going from one thing to another and like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, that was my presentation, and so the rest is just open discussion for you guys. I'm curious if anybody's number changed.
Mine too.
Yeah, what did you like?
I started as a 5, but I feel like I'm a little bit more like, I don't know, I meditate, I yoga, I feel like I do a lot of these practices daily that kind of get me closer to that. But then I also feel like 5 is kind of like, I can get really sucked into myself and rumination, and then I can also in the same day kind of go much more good. So I thought 5 was, yeah.
That's
And
your
then I went
average.
to a 2, but that's because I was like,
In the moment, yeah.
really breathing myself out and taking it all in. I live kind of a few blocks away, and I like expanded out and like said hi to my little doggy a few blocks down. So that's weird that I just said that. But yeah, so I think I was a 2 in that moment.
Alright, cool.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any number they want?
Mine changed because I think I misunderstood the question at the beginning. It's like, I thought it was like how, it was like an intensity scale, like how independent do you operate, or how self-contained are you, and then on the other end is like, you're completely interdependent.
Okay.
And now at the end, what I understood more is like, do you exist more in context of yourself, or in
Right.
context of family, or country, or world,
Right,
or
right.
whatever.
Okay.
So my number moved from, I was at 2, because we are so not as independent as we would
Yeah,
like to think
that's
as
an honest
Americans.
answer, yeah.
But I became more of a 6 because you can't really like touch the cosmos, even though
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
So like it dragged me closer to like the things that I will have a first or second or third degree connection with.
Right, okay.
Yeah, my number also drastically changed because I think I misunderstood. Because it's like, I thought like, how connected am I, or how much do I need the environment to exist? And it's like, I could time travel and I could go back like, I don't know, like 1,000 years, and I could explain like, there's a computer, you know, and people would be like, cool, do it. I don't know how. Like, I'm not the person who could like build something or do
Right,
these things. Probably not even like a knife, I don't know. So to that extent, I need people around me, and I need the air that I'm breathing, and I need the exact location of the planets in order to have like what we have.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is what I thought, like, yeah, of course I'm a 1. It's like, you know, I need all of that. It's like connected, but yeah, it moves drastically.
Anybody else have any like insights or questions or like, yeah?
Yeah, so I've got a few comments about the presentation. Thanks, by the way, I thought it was really interesting. I think you had a lot of insights. So like,
And I remember you said I am a skeptic.
yeah, so I'm about to be a little skeptical.
Go for it, man.
So your opening assumptions that you shared with us, I'm just going to restate some of them, or actually all of them that I've heard. Humans are social animals. It is very rewarding to interact with other people. We are affected by other people in your life, and our brains are affected as well. Would you agree those are your opening statements or whatever?
Yeah, I think it's rewarding to interact with other people is, I mean, very contextual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because that was the one statement that I had like an issue with when you said it.
I mean, that doesn't certainly, I wouldn't say that it is always rewarding to interact with other people. I'm saying our brains are wired to respond chemically in favorable ways towards interacting with people that, you know, certainly interacting with our close family.
Right.
But just as I said, you know, the same oxytocin that bonds us to our immediate family makes us, you know, antagonistic towards people outside of that circle.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that was the one statement that I think is like worth kind of exploring a little bit.
Yeah.
So like, it's not, to me, it's not it is rewarding, it's that it can be rewarding. It can also be very bad to interact with people. Like,
Absolutely.
Like and that I think is something that needs to be like fully acknowledged in this conversation.
Yeah.
So like, when your next question was, what can we do to make our lives better based on this information, right? So if we adapt that assumption to it can be, and it also can be bad, right? So my personal response to that question was just like, okay, develop relationships with people who you connect with based on like vibes or goals or values or whatever, right? And basically avoid people who you don't seem interested in connecting with you, or don't, to use a very instrumental phrase, like who don't add value to your life, right?
I mean, I 100% agree with that, and I think it's a great plus to this conversation, because I certainly don't want anyone to take away from this like you should go take that toxic person and try to fix them and empathize with them and like go active listen to them, right? If they're toxic, you can
to you. Toxic to you.
Yeah, then absolutely feel free to like never talk to them again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually think
It
that's
doesn't keep you from empathizing with them, perhaps, but you still need to act in a way that, you know, protects your own well-being.
Right, and I think that's actually like a good hack that like people should like consider for themselves, right? So like, I'm sort of in a phase or season of my life where I'm sort of like engaging with that, right? So like all my social media circle has gotten a lot tighter in the last month or two, which has, you know, involved like some difficult decisions about like unfollowing or unfriending or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that the social media piece is also something we didn't really kind of explore, but like it's like a real thing, right? Like you can get social reinforcement, you can get positive reinforcement, you can also get like just like, you know, emptiness or just like no responses from people that you expect to get responses from.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that like I think ultimately just being like kind of skeptical, as I said, like with new people in real life, and also with like online connections is like an important like piece of this. I just want to offer that.
I don't disagree with that at all. And I didn't address that, but I yeah, like I said, I don't want anyone to take away with like go open-armed and rosy-eyed towards everyone you see and like try to make friends with everyone in the world. But I think so yes, I think absolutely that discernment is good. I feel like, you know, I'll just say like for myself that like, you know, election night is tomorrow, and like there's you know, there's forces out there that like scare the crap out of me, and you know, that I wonder like why do they vote completely different than, like, are we even seeing the same world? But I can also have compassion for those people, you know, and understand, like, if my life had been like their life, maybe I would see the world the same way that they do. But that doesn't mean that I have to like go march into a rally, you know, that's, you know, filled with hatred and like try to make friends, you know. So
I'm going to like kind of carry on.
Yeah.
So continue on more than carry on. Speaking about things about humans like needing to, the whole reference of people being social animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like one thing that struck me from the very beginning, I was thinking like, it's not an opinion, it's the human history. Like the fact that human beings have been, for the most part of their history, hunter-gatherers. And hunter-gatherers have to operate in groups. And that different groups have to collaborate with each other. Yeah, I read the Sapiens book, so this is full disclosure, I wasn't like literally like reading everything. It's like, oh, I didn't know this, but like, you know, some of these ideas like start making more sense. I really think that, I think we have inner need. It's not a question like the outcome, it's about the journey. And for me, it's like, I would actually be daring and say like, yes, we need to reach out, be rosy with everybody, because the best way to overcome fear is to engage, but engage constructively. Also, people who are not necessarily bringing value to us, if we create assumptions, we already like say like, oh, they're toxic. If everybody's around you toxic, then maybe, well, I'm talking about myself right now, I'm not gonna put it like this, maybe I'm toxic, right? So like, maybe like, no, so first judge yourself, then others kind of stuff, kind of approach. Or maybe like what helped me in the past, and before like saying anything mean, I'm really thankful I had this, because I can speak a lot, but like I just like check inside me. I slow down like 10 seconds, and like then I say something that's like way toned down. And one thing that really like hit me, I remember when I was growing up and even like in college, the people who I despised the most in the first interactions became my best friends. That was wild.
Yeah.
Because they brought something to the table. I learned something. And I'm one of those people, when these people say like, and I would encourage other people to kind of start thinking of things this way, because I lived in different countries and stuff like that, and blah, blah, blah. I went through a lot of stuff, like wars and who knows what. But when you say like, talk to a stranger, maybe you're thinking instead like, oh, meeting somebody who you don't know. Because stranger is like, oh, stranger, fear, they're different, they think differently. Maybe you learn something.
I mean, I feel like those 2 points are not in conflict. I think you can be cautious and open-hearted.
But my take, I feel very strongly about this, is we have an inner need to connect.
Yeah.
And despite the outcome could be horrible. We should be worried about outcome, because we can pick ourselves up, other people have picked themselves up, but we still need to like continue the journey, connect. Because sometimes we'll discover that value as we connect, which wasn't obvious in the beginning.
Some fuel to that, I cannot remember the podcast. I think it was on Hidden Brain. I just listened to a study where they did this experiment, and it's very context specific, but it was like on the train, people assume no one wants to talk to anyone. And they measured repeatedly these studies where, as the experiment was just literally someone breaking a conversation in with someone else, and then they would measure the results at the end. And even in like cold-hearted like London, the results were like, on average, like surprisingly positive.
Right.
Like we're all assuming that no one wants to hear from us,
Right.
and then we all have a generally good time having done that. Which
So
is
that
interesting.
person on the train is usually me. And it's super cool. Like,
Yeah.
Anybody who hasn't had a chance to raise their hand yet that like had a thought, had a question, yeah.
Yeah, I think, so I just moved from Houston, but I think even what you were saying earlier was really in relations to like proximity. And so I think a lot of times the hard part is finding your tribe, like, because a lot of times we are changing and we're, changing from one chapter to the other. And sometimes we want to leave certain things behind. And so sometimes it's hard to leave your friend group because you do need that connection with your friends, right? But then it's also like, how do I get into another tribe that kind of, like inspires the person that I want to be, kind of thing. So I think that is like a really difficult part also for like people as well, as you're changing also.
Yeah.
My God.
It's hard here in Austin too to do that.
To sort of break into.
Because groups just keep changing.
yeah, a lot of people leave.
It's hard to do here? You think it's hard to do here?
Yeah.
I just moved from California, and I would say for the specific reason, because it's the easiest place I've ever done it is here.
No, the problem is people leave.
Yeah.
So you establish a
Oh, I see.
group of
Okay.
friends and they're all gone. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, that was like,
But because I say the same thing, for example, I said the same thing about Berlin. It's like people come there for 1 year, 2 year, and then they go. So
Right.
you build up like circles again and again and again, and you say hello and goodbye.
Right.
But it's like, do you make the most of it in the meantime, and do you keep the connections, like even though someone like moves on, and what happens with you in the meantime? Did you also like somehow move on, even if you're in the same space, but are you still open for new experiences in the same city? Because this is what I like just kind of reflected on this morning. It was like, in Berlin I did not went to any meetups anymore, or did not try, because I was like, I'm leaving anyway, like why should I? And here within a week I went to 2 or 3 meetups and I met new people. I was like, that's nice, like I'm connecting. Like so do you give yourself the chance to still reach out in the same spot, or do you just like kind of close off?
yeah, I did my neighbors. I had very, especially during the pandemic, like such a very strong relation with neighbors, like it was super cool. And then they left, and now there's some people who are renting close by, and I'm like, okay, and they keep changing. I'm like, I say hi, but I had not really that much of an incentive to get to know them, because they'll be there for who knows how long.
I mean, I think a common theme that like many people have mentioned is sort of, and I think Robin was talking about that this morning, like sort of the mismatch between like the environment that our brains evolved in. Our brains don't evolve our humans and biology doesn't evolve very fast, right? But culture evolves very, very fast. And so, we evolved that we would see the same, few dozen people all the time, right? And so, and you didn't have to choose to interact with them, like you had no choice but to interact with them. And so now we're in this environment where we're kind of, segmented and encapsulated ourselves into all these different containers, and so it is hard. It's hard to make friends. You have a family that you grew up with, but beyond that, it's very effortful because that's not been most of human experience, that you have to go find your people.
Don't you find though that, I don't know where you guys are, I'm sure it's not in the beginning, but it's like as I got older, I think this connecting thing is very tiring. And I just tune out. I can do with relationships, like right now I'm going to see my buddy that I watch a game with, and I watch a game with him, and I don't have anything else to do with him. I just like it that way, and I don't really want to have long-term relationship and all, and the kids, my kids are done. I'm sort of, I like just being without connection. I'm a 4, what I said, I stayed at 4. I just feel like, you know, I've seen all those connections, and there's value to them, especially as you grow in your business and such, you know, but, and I've done the religion thing, and I don't know, I just like being on my own and not having to worry about, that's, I don't know,
Well,
it's
that's the other
sad.
thing is like, you know, Sarah asked jokingly, like, is there a wrong answer? And there's no wrong answer to any of it, it's all contextual, right?
There you go.
Like, we were talking about broad averages across billions of people, and, you know, the answer for you is different than the answer for me, and the answer for me today is different than the answer for me tomorrow or 20 years from now. Yeah. So that's very appropriate. You know, that I'm sure you probably would agree that, like, over the course of your life, though, you know, connection to other people is important, right? It's just might be a matter of dosage, you know, depending on personality and circumstances. Yeah.
Theater. Oh.
I'm just thinking about, you know, because I think I've fallen into this trap. I've been in Austin about, like, almost 3 years, I think. But when you talk about, like, sort of finding your people, or, you know, like, putting yourself out there, like, how do you connect with the right people? I kind of feel like maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, and that's how I've been thinking about it. But, like, when y'all were growing up and you were in school, do you feel like you had, like, close, like, meaningful friends when you were, like, in 2nd grade, or 5th grade, or in your neighborhood, or certain jobs you've had? And I don't look back and think, oh, it's because those were just the right people at the right time, right? There wasn't some, like, magical equation that happened that made those people, like, core social connections. I think it was just mere exposure, proximity, being there together consistently over time, you know, getting over the biases, having more chances to interact, more chances to talk about things. And so in some sense it's like, if you just, not to say if you go hang out with a totally wrong crowd and you just try every day for 365 days, you're suddenly gonna have social connections, but maybe. And I'm kind of wondering about that, because it feels like maybe it's like dating, it's like you're gonna find the one, and I think we have this sort of concept about friendships as well, and it's a huge barrier. And so that's why there's a lot of evidence that, you know, going and sitting at a coffee, being a regular somewhere, and just going to the same place, like, every day, or the same yoga class, or, you know, that can form a genuine connection. And yes, there's some similarity, you're showing it for the same activity, maybe you like the same things, but I don't think you really have to. Like, I don't think you have to go find, like, this mythical tribe.
Well, I like the point you, like, I'm taking away that, like, your childhood best friend wasn't like cosmic coincidence, 1 in a million. It's like they live next door to you.
They were there even when you didn't want them there, right?
That's right.
Yeah, but now I think it also feels like we have to be more discerning, and I don't know, we also have these really strong identities we have of ourselves that we feel aren't malleable, and I think we just get more rigid and create more expectations, put more barriers. And so that's just something that came up for me in this discussion, so maybe y'all will.
Aaron, you didn't get a chance to talk yet.
I have so many thoughts, but I think one of the biggest things, especially for the people that are new here, like, I'm naturally an introvert, and I've been in Austin for 12 years, and I probably, like, felt like homeless and disconnected for probably the first 7 years of that. And I think one of the biggest life-changing things that I did, and I feel like where I'm at now is, like, probably the best I've ever been in my life as far as, like, connection, is I started hosting. Just like going to stuff like this and having a good conversation with someone once, instead of inviting them to a one-off coffee that might get canceled 5 times and never end up happening, or it does and then it doesn't lead to anything. I just started hosting a happy hour at my house. And it'd be like, I'd meet someone at this meetup, I'd meet someone playing basketball, I'd meet someone country dancing, and just have a good conversation, be like, hey, in 3 weeks I'm having, you know, just some people over for snacks and drinks, and I've done it once a month for 18 months now, and that's turned into hosting 1 event a month, so like this month I'm hosting 8.
You're an introvert?
But like I work, thankfully through the pandemic I work alone most of the day, so by the time 5 o'clock comes around I'm ready to see the people that I like to see. But like being consistent, like Sarah said, like that's hard these days when we don't all work in offices 5 days a week anymore, and we work halfway across the world, and we don't go to school for 8 hours a day 5 days a week.
So like the easiest way to be consistent is you be the spot, you be the person. And to do that like every single month, and then you start to gravitate, those people gravitate towards you. So I just thought I'd share that because it's literally been life changing.
It's kind of like the fake it till you make it
Yeah.
mantra of just like.
And the first couple times I did it, I was like so nervous and exhausted after, but like it's literally been, I just hosted 25 people 3 hours from here at Garner State Park a year and a half ago. I would like never guessed that I could have done that. So that's just one thing, like go to a few things and find, you know, your people or someone you have a good conversation with, and then invite them and just do it consistently, and then cool things happen.
Question, May. Is it, like, we talk about people, and I was thinking, one thing that hit me, like, it's not like finding magical people, finding tribe. Is it people or energy? It's like you put out energy out there, and if you put it out, people see it, they come to you. So it's almost like there's energy exchange, and that's basically, that's how friendships are formed. And sometimes you don't have to necessarily, okay, obviously the segue right now, but like sometimes you don't have to necessarily see these people even from the past for a long time, but since you had these energy exchanges, like I had these very strange moments. I had some friends from college, I didn't see them for years and years and years and years and years, like, we haven't talked. And then I see them and I was like, whoa, it's like yesterday, nothing changed. So I think a lot of it has to be energy that's like,
I guess I would, maybe from the behavioral science lens, I might say, you know, context, right? And so like, if maybe the energy is like, if you approach someone with a certain demeanor or energy, right, you might get a different person than if you had approached them.
Correct. It's not like what we say, it's how we say it.
Right, right. Because you know, again, personality is not fixed, and it's not even, you know, my personality, if I worked in a law firm, you know, in a suit and tie every day, is going to be different than the personality if I worked at HEB and I was, you know, checking people out, right? Same human being, but different context is going to show up completely differently.
Also, a good example is like if you try to like do code switching from one language to another, if you're a different person, like, it's like you know, you like operate a different code that you like, and you can like maybe be more daring because you know that you can get away with some things.
Right.
Like I would never say some things in US versus I feel more free when I'm like in some other parts of the world. But like, okay, I can actually have more of a direct conversation. And I, like one thing I remember, like I'll never forget, I was doing an internship in Albania. That's very similar to some aspects to where I'm from, some aspects. And I remember like people from the US Embassy were like, be careful, man, don't worry, I know what's okay, what's not okay. And never got in trouble, but some people from US Embassy who are Americans, who didn't practice that skill, they got in trouble every single time. So knowing how to kind of like engage is kind of going back to the thing, like when you practice that. And it's almost like it goes like we kind of like become too like one thing we didn't put earlier today, like to me is like not just like angel and devil. To me there's also a fight between extrovert and introvert in me. When my introvert kicks in, I hate it. When my extrovert is like present, it means so much like I'm my default you know mode. I feel safe and it's almost like so I don't know. That's how I was thinking energy exchange, because that's kind of like, I don't know how for other people here, but for me, like being in a coffee shop, like it brings me energy. So being around people, and I work remotely now, and that's almost like I feel like that movie, Count of Monte Cristo. I'm in prison, almost like you know, and it's hard. So I'm definitely like appreciating some of the ideas people are bringing up and stuff.
From there was a bit in there about like we're social by nature evolutionarily. Is within modern, like across modern cultures, is there evidence for or against like level of connectedness being related to like the power of the society or the longevity of the society or anything like that?
That's interesting. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there's a related concept which is sort of like open societies versus closed societies, that kind of theorizes that when societies have been under attack, that they're much more communalistic. They enforce norms because that's their way of surviving, right? And when societies have had long periods of peace and prosperity, they are more individualistic and more permissive because they've been able to be, right? So that's kind of related to that idea.
Yeah, there's one called Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of it, but one of the dimensions in there is collectivism versus individualism.
Yeah.
Could we say societies that are more interconnected, they're more resilient? And we're assuming the binary, like sometimes like collectivism versus individualism. There's such thing also something in between. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but like more like social capital, like having, again, go back to that neighborhood thing, like, you know, being like people who are able to survive with very little.
Yeah.
Because they know how to build the land.
Yeah, it's definitely not binary.
Yeah.
It's definitely a scale. I think the theory was like, if a society is under threat, you kind of need everybody to be on the same page. You can't tolerate quite as much like experimentation, and so those societies kind of close ranks.
I would agree 100%, and I would disagree maybe, I would agree with 99% and disagree very strongly with 1%. I would say then also people have to be more creative, how they communicate with each other, and it's wonder how, you know, people think, oh, everybody's towing the line. No, they're not.
Yeah.
There's like so much happening underneath.
Subversively.
I mean, not visible to the eye.
Yeah.
We can like, just with judgment call, but like, not so obvious, but it's happening.
Yeah. Cool.
But isn't that like when it's an attack also like, because it's fear, we connect stronger when we are afraid. So when we scare people through media, I don't know, the news, then we kind of have like this collectiveness because everybody wants to protect what they think they own or who they are or whatever. So it's like driven by fear a lot, like in the behavior, right?
Yes, but I'm trying not to say but
1%.
And I would add to that people who go through wars and go through like a lot of conflict, they have nothing to lose anymore. So they're like, okay, the only thing I have left, I can only go up. So it's almost counterintuitive. They're actually more willing to challenge things and speak up. It's almost like, and that's why I think that there's like these phases in many parts of the world. You have like people are quiet, and all of a sudden there's a huge change. You're like, wow, how did this happen? Well, at a certain point you start going up because you keep going down and you keep like being like this at a certain point, and you have nothing to lose. I think actually people who have a lot, they're less likely to be willing to challenge things. Because there's like, oh, what's the price? But if you have nothing, you're like, okay, they already took everything, so what else do I have to lose? That's stuff. I mean, it's a combination, I guess. But
I was just starting to ponder, well, what if we have no free will or very limited free will? In some abstract sense, I almost feel like that's the case, and we're all just observers of this experience that's kind of happening to us. And, you know, we have an interesting observer role in a lot of this. You know, it almost abstractly makes me feel more bonded with someone that, you know, has radically different experience. You know, that I see less othering in that scenario.
Right. Good. I mean, I don't know if you're thinking the same thing, but to me it goes back to that comment of like, if I were you, I'd be you, right? Like basically, if like at an atomic level, I was exactly you, then how can I say that like I would think or behave radically different, you know?
So is there a measurement of success of oneness by society?
I don't know.
How do we know we're getting to the goal of being one? Is it a goal?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I think it's probably a little, maybe that's a little metaphysical question. I mean, so there like psychologically, you know, we can get a scale that's got a better question, less confusing question than this, right? That we can ask people sort of like, do you believe this or this or this? That can sort of quantify it, but I feel like you're asking more from a standpoint of like self-actualization, like how do you measure sort of where you are, which, I don't know. I mean, I think probably, you know, a neuroscientist would give you one answer, a Buddhist would give you a different answer, you know, like it depends on like who's measuring it by what standards.
I think along those lines, something that is measured and kind of being researched and tracked is, so I'm studying ecotherapy at the moment, and so there is data on like happiness and mental health.
Yeah.
With, in terms of connectedness to nature and your environment, and so we've been talking exclusively about people connections, which is important and like a big part of human life, but at the same time, if you look at indigenous cultures who are very closely connected to their ecology and to their environment, there's like tangible evidence of like their pieces of land are healthier because they know how to live with it and how to like be more environmentally friendly with their practices. They know how to, you know, burn forests without destroying the forest and things like that. So there's like tangible things of like how do you measure success of or like the benefits of interconnectedness through things like that. But also on the psychological mental health aspect of like connectedness with nature, there are now like research evidence of we actually produce oxytocin and serotonin out in nature, and with like we have a whole species isolation depression related illness now because we're so stuck indoors, and in evolution we've only spent like less than 0.01% of our time actually indoors and isolated. And so a lot of that is impacting all of our anxiety and depression nowadays. And so even people who like, you know, volunteer at pet sanctuaries or like bird watch are happier than people that don't interact with any other species beyond humans. And so there's measures like that that will prove like interconnectedness is beneficial.
Now there's a movement.
That's why I'm studying it.
That's cool.
Who needs a boyfriend when you get a puppy?
What I found fascinating, I saw this video, I don't know if you saw it, maybe it was like viral, they keep putting it everywhere, I don't know, everywhere, maybe not, about toddlers in Denmark being dressed up in these little suits, and they would like line up in kindergarten, like kids are barely walking, and they were jumping in mud.
Oh no, it's true. I've lived here for the last like 10 years.
I'm not saying, I didn't mean to say that I said it's true or not, I'm saying how widespread it is. I don't know if everybody saw it or not.
Yeah, no, it's totally wide. Like I'm just saying that is like the daily school experience.
But it's a connection between like each other, but also like kind of like really enjoying
There's a
dirt.
growing movement for nature schools for preschools and kindergartens to get kids more connected to the outdoors.
But what I find is sometimes we have to like think about, oh, it's happening in some community out there.
No, there's a
I
lot
grew
of
up like that. And I'm thinking like my grandparents, great-grandparents, like they were living like that. So it's like there's a way to bring it back, like but also like maybe, okay, I'll be quiet. But like one last thing, I started getting very interested in this idea of mobility around cities. And there's like, I follow on LinkedIn, there's like, I think they're from Netherlands. They're talking how many cities were won back. Like cities are no longer like for cars. So they become like, they're more urban now, and people can walk. And how they can affect like how people, and there's also coffee shops which don't allow cell phones. So people just read and unplug, and it's like.
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, I would jump to you.
Oh, well, so I didn't completely tie in, but on the general connectedness thing, for anybody who's seen Clifton StrengthsFinder, like my company does it for all their employees. So I took it a few years ago, and one of the 35 strengths on there, I don't know why they call it a strength, but it is connectedness. And so I took it, and I think connectedness showed up in like my top 10 or something, maybe 10 or so. And I was, and the way they couched it was kind of weird, and I was like, I don't know, why is that on there? That doesn't seem like a strength. But the more that I reflect on it, you know, over the years, I've thought, oh, yeah, I do feel like we're all connected. Whether it's good or bad, like whether you want to be connected to people or whether it's not about like whether you enjoy being connected to people, but to me it's more of a fact that like
The reality of
the
it.
election, like there are people in Pennsylvania tomorrow who are gonna vote, and it's gonna impact every person in this room, and then it's also gonna impact people in China, and like, and that's partly our global society, but that like, that, I don't know what the scale is, I mean, I don't know how you determine that, but like, but our actions affect each other.
Right.
And then it feels like a lot of the religion stuff is like, hey, if we try to be good to each other, then we'll have better outcomes. And so that's, I don't know, that's something that's definitely on my mind, that like, if we kill each other, things get worse.
Right.
We,
To me,
you know,
I mean, just personally, like, I think there's, like, what you're articulating is like, there's the fact of how connected we are, and then there's, do we act accordingly, right? Do we act as if the other people's behavior is going to impact me and vice versa, or do we, like, the fact is the fact, right?
Yeah.
Biology is the biology, the economy is the economy, but then it's, I would say, like, it's when we neglect that reality and just act as if, like, I can be a bull in a china shop and do whatever I want, you know, that's the problematic. It's not good for me and it's not good for you, you know?
Yeah, I have kind of this unique experience, I think probably similar to yours. I've traveled a lot in my life, sort of not of my own choosing, because I grew up in the military. So like by the time I graduated high school, I had gone to 12 different schools. So I had this experience where I get kind of plopped into a group, and there's different degrees of connectedness I feel each time I get dropped into a group. Sometimes I'm very popular, and I would say 80% of the time in all of these situations, it's kind of, you have no friends. You just kind of don't know anybody.
You're just permanently the new kid.
Yeah, and people don't know what to do with you, and it doesn't really fit. And in my adult years, I found this term called third cultureness. So like I discovered I was a third culture kid, and there's all these like psychological properties associated with third culture kids, like their desire to be connected and their ability to perceive things in others, and all of these things. And it's interesting to me to like think about these ideas from my own life experience, because I feel like I've been in a petri dish the whole time.
Well, do you feel more connected or less? So we also have, I don't know if everybody remembers, but we were also nomads for 7 years as adults. So like, if you just kind of, we just kind of continue our like traveling and dropping ourselves in and out. And it's funny because I also am military brat, but I didn't move very much. All of my friends just kept leaving me because I lived in Hawaii,
moved around her.
and so I just had kids coming, being my friend for 2 years, and then getting shipped to Germany or Japan or wherever.
We
so
actually lived in the same place, but at different times.
Yeah. So anyway, but then as adults we chose to do that to ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know why we did.
Yeah. What does that say?
Well, I'm an introvert by nature anyway. So, but he's much more extroverted than I am. But we were able to find temporary tribes, like via the internet. Like we just connected with other nomads who had similar interests as us, or just similar, like, or half of it was that they happened to be in the same city that we were going to be in, and maybe we would adjust our travel schedule a little bit so that we can meet them in person. But for the most part, we were like, what did I say? I was just talking about this yesterday. Like we were like independently connected groups, I guess. Like we were like each either individuals or like smaller groups, and we would try to occasionally connect with each other, both online and like in real life, as we were traveling around the world. And I thought that was really interesting. Like I wouldn't have found them without the internet, but I think the in-person component to talking to them was definitely important in the feeling connected to them. So
I've also kind of found that some groups are more open to self-organization. So some groups are very just like, they are who they are, and their identity is very rigid, and their like in-group, out-group sense is very rigid. And that's one thing. But then there are other groups, like often in cities, often with younger folks, often, you know, certain kinds of mindsets. They're more open to being, you know, like being shaped into things like you know, like regular get-togethers or something like that, where people are sort of self-assembling. And I think humans, what I've noticed and what I've sort of cultivated across my life is this ability to sort of seek self-organization when I crave it. So I can just like kind of be insular and by myself and just study or, you know, whatever, but sometimes when I want to go out into the world and connect with others, there are certain ways of doing that. And I think it's interesting how quickly you can go like through that continuum. You can go from like having none to having quite a lot. Just through your own will.
Did I miss you on something?
This is a few steps further back, but you're talking about, I mean, the election is tomorrow, and
Right.
all of the stuff you could talk about with connectedness there or not, and this diagram reminded me a bit of a shift that I've personally done, kind of as a self-defense from anxiety about national politics, because it is so far towards the one, like so far, you're so many degrees separated from it. So you can read national news, and if it's good news, that's great, but if it's bad news, there's not really much you can do about it. You'd have to go through several degrees. And so it's just like a stress machine when I was reading national news. And so a few years ago, I forget why I started, but I started tuning out more national news and tuning in more local news and more local policy stuff, which gets a bad rap from like Parks and Rec, but it is silly sometimes. But I crunched the numbers one time, and you're even if you're just voting, if you're not even like volunteering or something, your vote counts like as a percentage of what changes in your community 1,400 times. For Austin in particular, it varies by city, but compared to like your vote in a presidential election. So obviously you should vote in the presidential election and in the state election. But it's been a big, I mean, I'm still stressed now just about local things. But that takes a different form where like I just like co-led a protest against the highway expansion like a week ago. And so there's just more you can like do about it. Also I've made like the largest number of new friends that I've made in years by joining a couple of these groups. It's also like a great place to like meet people you might date, which is hard and dating apps blow. And so local, even if you don't do all the volunteering, like just, you know, read whatever the Chronicle or whatever recommendations you trust about, like don't bypass the local stuff. It's like you have a lot more control over the local stuff because it's closer to town.
Do you find that the local news, I always felt like local news in any city I've lived in, somewhat like insular? Like it's like
oh, don't watch TV news, local news, no. No.
Yeah, just like actually a complementary strategy that I employ that I think is a way to attack the same problem that you just described, which is that like the news is extremely stressful, at least like the national news is. Like what I'm personally doing is disengaging from the daily news cycle, so much so that I'm actually like completely disengaged. I'm trying to like find like a monthly magazine to re-engage with on the national level, but like psychologically, my psyche is like much healthier now that I've disengaged from the daily news cycle.
But do you feel guilty?
No.
I also want to say like paying for your news is better. Tend to get more higher quality writing rather than just like writing that just panders to the masses.
For the clickbait.
For clickbait,
What do you call it, anger news?
Paying for
paying
writing.
for your
paying for, I just said anger news, I was like, wow.
I've been watching that.
I see.
So that you have a vested interest in making sure that it's quality.
Well, just so you not think I'm a real nerd, I used to have a Renew group. I call my company Renew, but there's a Renew group. There's about 7 or 8 couples that we all had kids and we grew up together, and we were supposed to do it like one Lenten season. We ended up doing it 7 years of it. It was the most rewarding, and you walk away forever moved by those people forever, you know. But at the same time, it was like people started to have disagreements, and kids would date the other kids. Kids were dating each other, and there was art. And I just went, I don't know. I don't think I want to go back to that because there's so much responsibility to it. My reward, I'm just done with. I don't know. I'm sort of done with that. Not that I'm saying oneness is great, but it's just I like oneness. I really do. I watch the news, not too much, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm older. You know, that's a big deal too. But I like being alone.
But I think, like, to me, I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm an expert on this, but I feel like, to me, what we were talking about earlier, this is basically what I take away from this is that the reality is we are interconnected, right?
Correct.
That's not saying that you've got one friend or 10 friends or 0 friends. It's that the fact is you are interconnected to all the people around you and the rest of the world. And so how do you act in a way that recognizes that instead of acting in a way that as if I can do whatever I want and nothing matters, right? And so what you choose to do with that is it has less to do with like you should have a bunch of friends.
Correct.
Then I recognize that I'm interconnected with other people, and so when I interact with them, you know, I'll kind of behave accordingly so that it's good for me and it's good for them instead of, you know, putting more, you know, bad stuff and negative outcomes into the world. Does
So
that make sense?
one little thing, and then I won't say more. This has got to be running me out. I like this thing. We can say about the oneness, and it's true, and we talk about our groups we've joined. Did you notice that in this whole 2 years of election cycle discussion, not one person has ever spoken about the homelessness? No one. And I came from
Oh
a
no,
smaller.
I'll push back. They have. It's been a topic.
On the local or like state level?
Oh, sorry. Are you talking
National
about?
level.
Oh, national. Sorry.
And I'll tell you something. I'm even going to lose my thought. But
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It wasn't probably important. But I just know that that's one thing that I've. I'm saying I came from a smaller town before I moved. I moved here to launch an app about relationships. But the thing I was saying is that when I came here, I was amazed at how many there were, and I was amazed that you quickly learn to look past them, through them, around them, and we've given up on the idea of solving it. And we sit here as oneness, but yet we discount all of them out.
Yeah.
Forever.
There's actually a guy building a cool app for affordable housing. It's like Zillow, but for affordable housing to help with that.
Well, Kamala's gonna bring in 3 million homes, so that'll help. But I'm saying, that's just thing I noticed. I know we're at this higher level of thinking, but sometimes we can't forget those people.
I completely agree, and I can't say that I'm like solving it or I'm any better about it than anybody else. I drive by them every day as well.
Well, there's so many.
Yeah, but I do think like that speaks to me as well. Is that right? If I am connected to other people, then I should care about their well-being the same way that I should care about, you know, anybody here, or my checkout person at HEB, you know, like that. Yeah. Sorry.
Just to comment on that, you know, from also the behavior science perspective, like empathy, like the mirror neurons, like seeing people struggling, seeing sadness, seeing people suffer, feeling other people's suffering feels bad. And so a lot of times, like there's a wanting to turn away, sort of like as a, so like just that interconnectedness, like also sometimes doesn't help us solve the problems, right? Because we can, you know, if you see somebody cry, like I've had friends start crying and then I start crying too, and it's because I'm feeling that pain. And I think that's also kind of inherent in this problem we're talking about, right? Where there's suffering and it can be difficult to interact with, especially when you don't know how. And so it's just, yeah, just that interconnectedness and how that relates to how we relate to that issue, right? There's a lot of emotions involved.
This makes me sort of wonder if there's a scientific way to sort of capture like Peter Singer's idea of like circles of moral concern. You know, like he goes as far to like capture the whole animal kingdom and goes quite far, but I think, you know, if we're very quick to other the people around us when they become difficult to deal with, and I think homelessness is a very easy thing to kind of encircle, and it's a relatively easier thing than the entire animal kingdom to encircle. But I wonder if you could connect this like kind of in a behavioral science way, you know, in the direction of like Sam Harris's moral landscape, where you like use neuroscience and, you know, like use science to kind of measure the moral distancing and the moral circling that we do around things, and kind of get a tangible measure on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's been done.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think like you said, they're easy, you know, they're easier than sort of microorganisms, right? They're human beings, but they're also like easy to put in an out group, and they're really more convenient to put in an out group, because if I love my neighbor as myself, right, and the homeless person is my neighbor, and then it's like I should feel as sad about seeing them strung out or just, you know, asking for change as if like my best friend, right? And so that's like really hard to process. I feel super shitty every day, but it's like, how do you continue to sort of put the effort in to have that sort of empathy, so that, you know, it changes your support for policy or protests, or, you know, things that you can do, or simply like, you know, if you've got a Cliff Bar in your car and you pass it and you roll down the window, which you know didn't have to do or something.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of things would be pretty easy to sort of.
I think the key is just not to forget them.
Right.
Yeah.
We think about them, and we have compassion in our hearts. Our compassion in our hearts will guide us as a group to solve it.
I feel like we also in this country tend to intellectualize that problem versus like, we were in Thailand and we saw like, not even in high school, I want to say she was probably in middle school, a group of kids who were walking by and they saw a homeless person, and they had just come from the convenience store with snacks. And a girl literally just took her water that she had just bought and like a few snacks out of the bag and gave it to him, and he was like half asleep, and she just like left it on the side and like walked away. And as she was walking away, he kind of woke up and said thank you. And I was like, you know, I feel like in the US we're like taught to be like a little like afraid of the homeless. So like if a child had said that they wanted to do that, I'd be like really afraid of what might happen, right? But she didn't think anything of it. She just like went over, she knew she had food and gave some to him, which I thought was really interesting.
I want to thank you for using the word intellectualizing the problem, because that's something that I was thinking of some things. I was told this story about family friend, the grandma. She was retired, and she saw a person who was begging in the street, a person of Roma background. I don't know how familiar with Romani people. So what happened is this was exchanged. The exchange was, it wasn't like here's the money. It was a legitimate question. Why don't you work? So it's not just like, you know, having empathy, having compassion, having attention is engaging. So you would think just question and answer, but this is what happened. The lady that was begging said, I would work if somebody would give me a job. That person who was begging ended up living with that woman for 15 years and working for her. So it just like engaging, but it's like taking a leap of faith. Of course, like we need to be like not be naive, not be rational, but taking like engaging and like seeing where they can take you. Obviously, here is like two people who both, you know, end up like building trust and stuff like that.
Well, thank you guys. They're going to ask us to leave at 8:30, but I appreciate you coming and really enjoyed it.
Do you need
oh yeah, just put your pens and pads at the end of the table.
I remember talking to you.
It's like its own stresses that are like within arm's reach.
They're salt neurons.
Right.
I did a lot of
Oh yeah, some words are very it's spelled like and just like one thing like one another, and then slowly you like recover, and you know you just like the first thing was but
fully employed, fully exhausted, fine. But the thing is like, it was like a process of like, I guess, everything falling apart, and then it took like little steps to get everything together. It wasn't just like, didn't happen overnight, like both processes. But it's wild that, you know, literally like, he was living on the beach, and like, and like, you know, looking for food, like literally he was homeless, and then slowly some people who like recognized his need, they gave him a job, they gave him a stay, and then slowly like brought him back in. Again, it was also his choice, right? Like continuing that food, because sometimes like when you don't have the will to do it, that's the hard part.
I have a difficult time with this subject because I was homeless for an early part of my childhood life. I was sort of kicked out of my parents' house at age 18. I was homeless for some time. And then because I didn't have the funds, I was like trying to go to college. I went to college, like I was homeless for like semesters at a time while I was going to university. And then even towards the end of university, I was doing crazy things. I would take out a car loan to get apartment down payments, or apartment deposits, these sorts of crazy things that people shouldn't have to do. For sure. But I was like, you know, I was sleeping in campgrounds and, you know, sleeping out of tents, and then homeless people would steal my tents, and like, I was a homeless person. It was all very, like, it felt chaotic, and my identity shifted a lot in those years, because I like very quickly took on this identity of me being homeless, like I took on that name. So and to this day, it's like it's something that I identify with, and it's
So leaves a mark.
Yeah, it leaves a mark, and I guess that's a good way of saying it.
But would you agree that seeing you now speaking, it doesn't define you? Like my dad was an orphan, so he lost his father when he was before he was born. He lost his mom when he was 7 years old, and that left a huge mark on him, right? But to me, it's like he didn't end up, who knows how, right? He could end up completely different. So it doesn't define him. Like that, the mark is hard, yes, very much so, in many ways. But just like not letting, it's almost like I'm seeing something I talked to I just had like having a therapist. When I got laid off from the last job, I was just like found a therapist from where I'm from, and I speak my language in English, and it's like way cheaper than here, like maybe 3 or 4 times cheaper, if not more. But like I'm thinking about, sometimes it's like things that happen early in childhood that you survive. It's almost like surviving like measles or something. It makes you more resilient. It makes you more stronger.
I think so. I think I think where people, one of the, I mean, just from my experience, what seems to be the hardest part of dealing with homelessness is just the shame of feeling like you've now been excluded and you're part of this like outcast group, and feeling like you belong, back in society, back in the group that's outcast, and after you're in that state, it's very difficult to like come to terms with. You just feel like you don't belong there anymore. You know, like, if I'm sleeping out in my car, I'm not going to go participate in school activities because I just don't, I feel like I don't belong. What if they find out? What if, like, you know, it's so stigmatized that it's strange that it's stigmatized, that we even stigmatize something that is accidental. It's like something that's obviously going to happen in a complex society like ours. It's a structural
Something helps me is like society will do what society does. They will stigmatize, but it's not. I'm like, from my perspective, like I'm not going to let society define it.
Yeah, I mean, that requires you don't have strength.
Sorry,
that requires so much strength.
For sure. So for me, like what was difficult is during when I was. So I'm from former Yugoslavia area, Bosnia specifically.
I love Tito, by the way.
Yeah, I love Tito too. Sorry, but not in a crazy way. Like
no.
Yeah, because my grandfather was in his army, but he was also a dissident. We saw that from the
I went on a road trip through Bosnia not too long ago. I was like base camp in Belgrade.
Ah, cool. I have family members who are. So my mom was born in Croatia. I was born in Bosnia.
We're still moving. Okay.
Mari, mira hija, aquí en el piso 16 terminé de limpiar las cocinas y todo, pero ahorita entraron un grupo, están sacando, comiendo y se quedaron sentados en medio ahí de la sala, de la cocina. Cualquier cosa puede subir a ver. Y ella en el otro pequeñito del saloncito también está trabajando un señor. Solamente limpié el grande, el fondo, y el otro pequeño del otro lado. Oye, ya están comiendo ahí ahorita, subieron un grupo. Bueno, ok, bye bye.